Tonight on Capital Journal, we're talking tourism as Alabama boasts another record-breaking year for visitors to the state. The National Guard taps a new commander for the 187th Fighter Wing, soon to be home to the F-35. State Senator Will Barfoot joins us to assess the last 4 years in the legislature and look ahead to what the next 4 will look like. State Representative Chris Pringle offers an update on where the state's redistricting lawsuits are in the courts. Jane Addams of Cover Alabama discusses potential Medicaid expansion and getting low-income Alabamians health insurance. And Brandon Burrows, a systems engineer for Boeing, joins us from Cape Canaveral to preview the upcoming launch of Artemis 1. It's all next on Capital Journal. From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capital Journal. It is another record-breaking year for Alabama's tourism industry. Governor Kay Ivey and state officials announced this week that the state is projected to see $24 billion in economic impact from tourism. That's up more than $4 billion from last year. And to put it into longer perspective, the industry had an $11 billion impact back in 2013. Ivey was in Auburn at the annual Governor's Tourism Conference. She and Director of Tourism Lee Sentell said the state's industry weathered the pandemic better than most states.
Well, y'all, it's great to be here at the Governor's Conference on Tourism. This is the banner year for tourism, and in just 10 years, the tourism industry has grown from $11 billion with the B dollars to $24 billion. Y'all, that's remarkable. And it's due to the hard work and efforts of the folks who are involved in tourism, and I'm just proud to be a part of it.
In 2020, the national industry was down 45%. Alabama was down 20%. We were in the 5 top states with the least loss. It's because people discovered our state parks and our beaches and our outdoor recreation, and they liked it so much and they've come back.
While speaking to reporters in Auburn, Ivey was again asked about her health. Alabama Daily News reported 2 weeks ago that Ivey underwent a non-emergency outpatient intestinal procedure. But Ivey's office has not commented publicly about it, despite repeated questions from reporters. Ivey made it clear that she is in good health and told the media to, quote, move on from this nonsense.
I've been given a clean bill of health. Why doesn't that play in y'all's narrative? Let's get on beyond this and talk about important topics such as how can we do better to get our students to have good outcomes from their educational endeavors, or what can we do to create more opportunities for STEM innovation laboratories like they have at Dalrata Elementary. Let's get on with the important things of life, and let's move on beyond this nonsense.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention this week endorsed new COVID-19 boosters, which target the most common Omicron strains. The Alabama Department of Public Health says the new shots should arrive in Alabama within the next 2 weeks. Dr. Paul Goepfert, director of the Alabama Vaccine Research Clinic at UAB, explained the role that these new boosters will play in combating COVID-19.
The FDA has an emergency use authorization for the bivalent vaccine. So this is the new COVID vaccine that is bivalent, meaning 2, obviously. One part of it is the original strain, the prototype strain of COVID. And the second part is the new BA.4/5 strain, which is the latest and greatest strain. That's the most dominant strain that's infecting people currently. And by doing this, they are saying that it's okay to boost individuals with the Pfizer vaccine at 12 years of age and older, and with the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, 18 years of age and older. I should also say that usually the ACIP also meets afterwards, and they also provide their formal recommendations. While I don't know what they're going to decide, it seems unlikely that they're not going to recommend this new boost to individuals.
We should note the updated shots are only for use as a booster, not for someone's first ever vaccination. Another step in the journey for Alabama's medical marijuana law. The Medical Cannabis Commission announced that entities can now begin the application process to become a licensed cultivator, processor, dispensary, and other roles. The new law says the Commission can award up to 12 cultivator licenses, 4 processor licenses, 4 dispensary licenses, and 5 integrated facility licenses, and an unspecified number of secure transport and lab testing licenses. The new law also sets license fees at no less than $10,000 and no more than $50,000, depending on the category of the license. Only applicants who submit a request by October 17th will receive a business application form. Entities will then have until December 30th to file those applications. There's a new commander at the Alabama Air National Guard's 187th Fighter Wing. Colonel Brian Vaughn formally assumed command at a ceremony at Danley Field this week. Capitol Journal's Karen Goldsmith has the story.
It was a distinct military ceremony. That pulled at the honorees' heartstrings.
Heart full of gratitude. Thank you, Lord.
And it generated a popular Alabama greeting.
Colonel Vaughn, previously the 187th Vice Commander, holds a long list of impressive accomplishments, including being an Auburn graduate. Let me add, War Eagle, Colonel Vaughn.
As Colonel Brian E. Vaughn assumed command of Alabama's 187th Fighter Wing.
Attention to orders. In accordance with Air Force Instruction 51604 and by order of the Governor, Special Order Number G52, effective 2 August 2022, Colonel Brian E. Vaughn is officially assigned as the commander, 187th Fighter Wing, Danley Field, National Guard Base, Montgomery, Alabama.
And what we do here is extraordinary. It's not ordinary, it's extraordinary. And sometimes we take these types of ceremonies for granted as well, but this is a big deal. And this symbolizes the trust we have in you. It symbolizes the trust that I have in you, the trust that General Gordon has in you, the trust that Governor Ivey has in you, and ultimately the trust that the American people have in you for our nation's defense.
This is how we deliver. This is how we will deliver. By simply making a choice. It seems so easy. It's one of the hardest things you will do. And you have to do it each and every day. That's the challenge. To make the choice to lead. We all know what leadership is. We have to choose to do it. Thank you again. God bless. God bless America.
For Capitol Journal, I'm Karen Goldsmith.
In other military news, the Boeing Company has won a Department of Defense contract worth about $5 billion to integrate and ensure readiness of the nation's missile defense system. Boeing's work on the ground-based mid-course defense system will happen primarily at its Huntsville operations. The company wouldn't say exactly how many additional jobs this could mean, but Boeing employs about 3,000 people at its Huntsville facility and is the state's largest aerospace employer. Austal USA, a shipmaker with a major shipyard in Mobile, announced it would partner with California-based Saildrone to build autonomous uncrewed surface vehicles. The partnership combines Saildrone's uncrewed surface vehicle technology and Austal's advanced manufacturing capabilities. The 650-foot Saildrone Surveyor, seen here, is designed for deep ocean mapping and intelligence and will be manufactured in Mobile. Senators from Alabama and Georgia are urging Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to ensure there is a competition for the Air Force's next generation of refueling tankers. U.S. Senators Richard Shelby, Tommy Tuberville, and Raphael Warnock from Georgia sent the Secretary a letter making the case that competition is the best way to ensure transparency in defense procurement. The letter comes as Lockheed Martin and Airbus are teaming up to compete to build the tankers. The LMXT, shown here, would consist of Airbus 330s built in Mobile and modified for the military at Lockheed's Marietta, Georgia facility. If successful, the program could mean as many as 1,300 jobs between the two states. It's no secret that crime has been a problem over the years here in the capital city. Local leaders are now taking new approaches to reducing crime, and especially violent crime. Capital Journal's Randy Scott reports.
We have to keep that always at the top of our agenda, and it has to be our number one priority in terms of keeping the community safe and our residents safe so that we can grow this city the way we want to grow it.
Montgomery Mayor Stephen Reed says taking a new approach to fighting crime in the state's capital is in full effect for the well-being of the city and its residents.
We have to look at violence and crime as a health issue. And it's not only a public health issue, it's a wealth issue. It creates barriers to economic opportunity. It creates trauma in people who experience crime in their neighborhoods.
New re-imaging plans for the west and southern portions of Montgomery are aimed at jump-starting new progress for the whole city. To move that forward, safety will be a priority. That includes law enforcement being more visible and active in the community.
And I'm just so excited to see our mayor understand that crime is an issue, and he's leading the charge. He's saying, hey, let's come out, see something, say something. He's saying, hey, we're going to get the police involved. They're going out bagging groceries at the grocery stores. They're going over to the schools, having conversations with some of our youth.
Crime is down 20% year over year. Homicides are down 10%. And our police department is doing a great job in capturing those people who commit some of the crimes and having a 71% clearance rate. That is, those who are captured.
Investment officer and Montgomery native Lindsay Edwards says safety is a key part for this plan.
So I think the wellness of the community is absolutely something that we should focus on, because overall it makes the overall neighborhood more vibrant. People feel more safe. There's that sense of ownership and equity that I'm a part of the community, and I want to make sure that it's very well taken care of. But I think the health and wellness aspect is extremely important.
For Capital Journal, I'm Randy Scott.
It's College Colors Day in Alabama. You can see I wore my tie, as most of the state's college football teams kick off their seasons this weekend. Governor Ivey and Gordon Stone of the Higher Education Partnership gathered mascots from all the state's colleges at the state capitol. You can see some familiar faces there, Big Al, T-Roy, Aubie. Alabama universities are home to more than 180,000 students and have a $20 billion economic impact on our state.
The Alabama Higher Education Partnership continues to be one of the strongest advocates for our four-year institutions, and I'm truly thankful for all that this organization does for our students and the future of our great state. And in many ways, my participation in Student Government Association prepared me for my service here for the state. And as a proud graduate of one of our state's public institutions, a person whose career began in the classroom and today is your governor, I assure you all that you have my full and total support and will continue to work to make sure Alabama's 14 public higher education institutions and your students succeed. I'm thrilled to proclaim September 2, 2022 as College Colors Day in the state of Alabama.
Thank you, Governor, so much. Thank you for that wonderful. We'll be right back with tonight's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Joining me next is State Senator Will Barfoot from Pike Road. Senator, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
Now, you're here in the State House today for the Contract Review Committee. This is the joint House and Senate panel that looks at agencies and their contracts, kind of an oversight role. Can you tell me more about that process?
Yeah, so you're right. An important committee. It's comprised of members from both the House and the Senate, and every month, generally speaking, we're presented with potential contracts that state agencies have with outside entities, and we do a review of those, not the finer details of the contracts, but just the need and the availability of funds. And we either can hold those for a 45-day period, or they pass right through to go to the governor.
Mm-hmm. So really a big transparency role, maybe more than anything else.
Yeah, it is. And we can't stop a contract from happening, but we can shine some light on it, make some comments about something if we see maybe some things that are questionable. We certainly can do that, and we can also put a hold on it for those 45 days, which in turn I think creates some interest and maybe the ability for others to look into those things.
Now you are finishing your first term here in the state Senate. Kind of doesn't seem like that long, but I'm curious, for these last 4 years, what you would say maybe you've learned about the state Senate, about state government in general, that maybe folks wouldn't know.
Yeah, so I guess two things. One was a good surprise, and one I maybe didn't happen the way I thought it would, is that I thought, I'm a lawyer by trade, and I thought, you go down on the Senate floor and you get in the well and you begin to talk and discuss and debate issues, and that was the time to change people's hearts and minds, voting, the members of the Senate on the floor. And in reality, if you haven't done your work before then, you've waited too late to try to address issues or concerns or problems and try to convince your, other members of why they should vote for or against something. So that was kind of an eye-opening experience. I was maybe a little naive on that. The other thing I'd tell you was a pleasant surprise, and that is we're 27 Republicans currently and 8 Democrats in the Senate. And by and large, everybody is there, I believe, to do what their constituents want, what they believe that is best for the state or their constituents. So we may disagree, and sometimes, strenuously disagree with either maybe even members of our own party, but certainly members from the other side. But it was an eye-opening experience to see that folks are there doing the best they can for the folks that they represent, and that's a good thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Certainly a lot more collegiality in the Senate, seems like recently, than the House, where there's a lot of gridlock. But looking forward to next term, what are some of the things you might want to see the legislature accomplish?
Well, there's a whole host of things, and as you said, the first 4 years, quite honestly, the first year or so was a learning experience. Second year was a COVID year, and so there were some things, not only from my standpoint, that we weren't able to accomplish. I'm sure other members had that same problem of not being able to accomplish getting bills passed in a short time frame. One bill that we had last year that made it all the way through the Senate and on the House floor out of committee was a bill that would allow judges to require pardons and paroles to watch people, to monitor them after they bonded out but before trial, kind of a pre-trial issue there on violent A or B felonies. And so not just in Montgomery, but all across the state, you've got folks who may be charged with a robbery or a murder, and it may take several years for an indictment process, the grand jury process, to roll through and actually get indicted. So you've got folks that are out there for 2 or 3 years who have not been convicted of anything at that point on that case. But I think it's essential that when they're out on bond, that we know where they're at and what they're doing while they're out on bond for those most serious of crimes. So it would allow pardons and paroles to monitor them. They have the systems in place that, for instance, if a person is out on murder bond here in Montgomery County and got arrested in, say, Tuscaloosa Municipal Court, for that interaction for the DA's office here in Montgomery to know that there was maybe even just a misdemeanor in Tuscaloosa, but would give them that information so they could present that to the judge, and whether or not that person's bond should be looked at or potentially even revoked.
So that did not pass the House?
Didn't pass the House. It got through the Senate and through the House Judiciary and did not get a vote the last day it was on the floor in the House of Session.
Well, goodness, haven't there been some recent examples of people like you're talking about, accused of violent crimes,
sure,
out and committing murders. There was a recent killing of a law enforcement officer.
That's right, and you see, and those are the ones that you hear about, right? I mean, unfortunately, and again, I go back to, charge does not equate to guilt. There's the constitutional rights that we all have, presumed innocent, but as a particular qualification of a bond, the judge under this bill would be able to set the parameters that, hey, you've been charged with a violent offense, a Class A or B violent offense, and as such, pending the outcome of the trial, we've got the ability now to monitor you, not every day, but to monitor you, to make sure that you're gainfully employed, potentially, to make sure that you are not causing any of the problems or getting arrested or even convicted for any other offenses during that time. And I think that bill would certainly help.
There are going to be several new faces in the legislature next time around, both in the House and the Senate. You were the new guy once. You're going to have a lot of freshmen this time around. What might be your advice to some of these freshmen coming in?
Well, some of them certainly, have been around politics for a while and held other offices, and I had not. This was the first office that I'd held. So I guess each person may be a little bit different, but generally speaking, I would say, to watch, to learn. Senator Chambliss, I think, told me there were three P's, and that's the personalities you've got to learn in the legislative process. You've got to reaffirm what your policy beliefs are and stand strong on those. And then also the politics of different issues and how that may affect you being able to convince someone to vote for or against a bill that's important to you.
We can also see some leadership changes. One of your committees, the Judiciary Committee, you've done a lot of work on, will have a new chairman. This is after the current chairman, Tom Whatley, was defeated in the primary. I'm curious, are you interested in seeking that gavel as chairman of Judiciary?
Absolutely, and I've let my desire to chair that committee be known to the leadership. And
you're currently vice chair, right?
Vice chair of that committee, obviously a lawyer practicing in the Montgomery area, surrounding counties, and I think I'm well suited from the legal side of things to understand some of those bills and the effects that they have on businesses and individuals throughout the state. So certainly would appreciate that opportunity. I'm hopeful that when the time comes to be considered for that.
How does that process work? Is that a caucus vote, or is it simply from the leadership? How does the caucus go about determining who's committee chair?
Well, certainly I think from a leadership standpoint, and there's I believe a committee on committees that just like at a church maybe that decides which committee, which members should be on which committees, but that's certainly from the leadership role. The pro tem, Senator Reed, and then Senator Schofield as majority leader. I believe Governor Ainsworth and the two budget chairs would also have say so on that.
It's a very busy committee. I mean, y'all deal with a range of issues, and it seems like every week during session, that's the one committee that, number one, has a lot of bills, and number two, the meeting's going to last a while because you got a lot of people talking. So it's a pretty good challenge.
It is, and it's a challenge I look forward to if given the opportunity. You're right. I mean, number one, there are a lot of lawyers in there, right? So we like to talk sometimes. But there are a lot of bills that come through that committee. It's either committee number one or committee number two for the most bills that come through. And so it's challenging at times. It's a pretty evenly divided between Republican and Democrat committees. So there are bills that of grave importance to the state of Alabama. We spend a pretty good bit of time talking about those, trying to flesh those out, I think, in committee, and then see what happens on the floor once they get it through.
Well, one of those bills I wanted to ask you about that, like you said, had some momentum, but then died at the very end of the session. It was your bill. It was known as the driver's license bill. This would essentially limit the state from suspending driver's licenses from people with driving offenses, non-traffic offenses, failing to pay a parking ticket, not showing up to court. I talked to the Attorney General a couple months ago about his opposition to the bill, which eventually killed it. And he essentially said that it was because the issue was being litigated, and I think that's kind of on track now. Yeah. Do you think, should that litigation end, do you think there is hope to bring that bill back next session?
Well, I certainly think it'll be brought back next session, this upcoming session, one way or another. And I understand, being a lawyer and being in the courtroom, how important it is to prevail on issues that you're fighting for or against in the courtroom. We make the laws here, and so should those laws change, even pending litigation, you know, I think the Attorney General would enforce the law that's available there. So that bill itself, I mean, it did a couple of different things. It did not allow people to go scot-free without paying court costs or fines. It didn't alleviate the necessity for them to show up. But what you were seeing a lot of times is that individuals, maybe even here at the Hyundai plant, for instance, or other big corporations, if they didn't have a driver's license, they couldn't get on the plant to work, and that was one of the requirements. So what you see is that you have maybe an individual who is on a payment plan for tickets, court costs, or fines, making those payments throughout the process the way they're supposed to. And in certain jurisdictions around the state, maybe they'd made 3 years worth of payments, but they missed one payment. And because they missed one payment, that's sent into ALEA, and their license would be suspended. And I just think that's punitive. Certainly there comes a point in time where if you're not paying your court order, court costs and fines, we should use that as a tool, and we should suspend your license, amongst other things, if you're not paying your court costs and fines, like hold you in contempt and potentially lock you up. But I just think it was some jurisdictions were using it prematurely.
Okay.
So I think that it's an opportunity for us to get in a position where individuals are not having their license suspended for non-traffic related instances. And we're not talking about the guy who's got a DUI or something else. We're talking about some simple offense that has no direct correlation to their ability to safely drive.
Mm-hmm. Also a workforce issue.
Absolutely.
We're you know, a lot of companies really needing workers.
Yeah.
Well, Senator, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
on the show.
Appreciate you having me.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Next, I'm joined by State Representative Chris Pringle from Mobile. Mr. Pringle, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's always fun to be here.
Well, you were meeting upstairs in the committee room, and I asked you to come on downstairs. Let's have a real quick interview. And I appreciate you doing that because I know you need to get back south. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about was an update on redistricting. You are the co-chairman of the Reapportionment Committee. Went through all that last year. Now there's some lawsuits going on. Where do all those stand?
Yeah, there was a lawsuit filed against our congressional plan before we even had a bill, and it's continued. And a 3-judge panel ruled against us, and we appealed it to the Supreme Court. And October the 4th, the United States Supreme Court is going to hear the appeal of our case. And basically, we use attorneys that have done this for 20 years. These attorneys that helped us draw these plans are very experienced and know what they're doing. And we followed what we assumed was the law to the T. The 3-judge panel told us that we did not rely enough on race in order to draw districts. We were told you couldn't rely on race. You had to rely on compactness, contiguity, and communities of interest, and get the deviations down to 0, which has been the traditional reapportionment standards. So the question now before the Supreme Court is, do they want to change the law, and do they want us to start drawing predominantly on race for these congressional districts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, these are the congressional districts, yes. The 7 congressional districts. We didn't lose a seat, and so we actually gained a little bit of population, so the redrawing process. But you're right, there does seem to be this conflict between, okay, are you supposed to use race or are you supposed to not? Because for years I did hear you have to basically draw these districts race blind.
Which is what we did.
Okay.
The conflict has grown over the years, and it's a conflict between Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act and the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. And what the plaintiffs are alleging is because they have 28% of the population, they should have 2 congressional districts based on the Voting Rights Act. But the last 2 lines of the Voting Rights Act clearly say nothing in this law should be misconstrued that you will have representation based on the percentage of your population. So that's the question. What's more important, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act or the 14th Amendment of Equal Protection for the citizens?
Well, and Alabama is not the only state that deals with this kind of stuff.
No,
right?
In fact, the courts are staying other lawsuits I mean, reapportionment and redistricting is just litigated nonstop, but the court is actually staying other lawsuits saying we're going to wait till we rule in Alabama. So we've really become kind of the keystone, the lead lawsuit.
Now that's the congressional maps. What about the House and Senate at the state level? Are those also being challenged?
Yes, and the allegations are the same, and so the court, the federal judge in Birmingham stayed the state case, waiting for the outcome of the congressional at the Supreme Court level.
I see. Now it was several years ago where a court ordered the legislature to go back and redraw maps, specifically in the state Senate. Were there some lessons learned from that y'all applied to the current maps?
It was 12 House seats, and I can't remember exactly how many Senate districts. What the court ruled in that case was we relied too heavily on race to draw them, and they want us to draw more race-neutral plans.
Oh, really?
So now they've come back and say you need to rely more on race. It's just a conflict, and we have to be given directions by the court.
So October the 4th, you said?
They will hear the case is scheduled to be before the Supreme Court on October 4th, but they're not expecting a ruling until probably March of next year.
Well, we will be eagerly awaiting that decision. Big implications for Alabama and beyond. While I've got you, it's election season.
Yeah.
We're finishing up this term of the legislature. Probably won't meet again until the organizational session. And I wondered, looking back on this term, you're one of the more experienced lawmakers in the House. It's really kind of striking how most of the membership has only 1 or 2 terms. So I wondered, as one of the more experienced members, what you thought about this last term. It's kind of been challenging with COVID and everything, but were you satisfied with the legislature's work in this term?
I think the members did a good job. I think we passed some good bills, but I think the process needs to be tweaked. I became very frustrated with us never starting on time. I think it sends the wrong message that we're not able to get up and running at the appointed time. And a few other, I wasn't happy with the calendars. I thought we could have done a better job of managing our calendars.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to have, there in the House, basically all new leadership. You're going to have a new speaker, a new speaker pro tem, which I know you're running for. We'll get to that in a second. You have a new rules chairman, possibly a new House or general fund budget chair, maybe other committee chairs. That's a lot of leadership change.
A new majority leader?
New majority leader. All that with a new clerk coming in. So, it's just a lot of leadership changes. I know that you are seeking one of those positions in Speaker Pro Tem. Tell me more about that position and what you want it to be.
Let me back up a little bit on the new clerk of the House. That is a sea change. And if you've not been around this process and seen a changeover in the clerk's office, that's huge. And given new Speaker, Pro Tem, Majority Leader, all those new leadership roles, and you'll have a bunch of new committee chairmen. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a change, which is why I'm running for Pro Tem. I think my experience and knowledge of the system, the nuts and bolts of how this place is supposed to work, can be critical to the success of the next quadrennium.
So you want that role to be a lot more than ceremonial?
Yes, I want to take it back to what it used to be when Seth Hammett was Pro Tem or Jim Campbell was Pro Tem, and make it much more proactive. In the absence of the Speaker, the Pro Tem is supposed to preside. So if at the appointed hour, if the Speaker's not in the chamber, the Pro Tem is, by Rule 80, is to go to the podium and gavel us into order. And if the Speaker has to leave, the Pro Tem is supposed to preside over the chamber.
I know the role also, the position also has a big role on the Legislative Council.
Yes.
Which, is a kind of an internal thing. Maybe not a lot of folks familiar with what that body does. Could you explain a little bit?
Well, the council is there to act on behalf of the legislature when we're not in session. It has a tremendous amount of power, and it has a tremendous amount of power working with the clerk, dealing with our employees and all the issues, the kind of nuts and bolts issues that aren't exciting and nobody puts in their campaign brochures, but it's vital to the function of the House and how we operate and how we move legislation through and how we comply with what we have to do to get the bills passed.
And I assume that these positions, from Speaker on down, it's a caucus vote. The caucus will meet and vote on these things.
The House Republican caucus will meet November the 10th. We will decide internally who we're going to nominate and vote for Speaker and for Pro Tem. The majority leader is simply voted on by the caucus. But when we return in January for our organizational session, it's really interesting. It's the only time in the Alabama House that we don't vote by machine. It's very stoic. It's very quiet, and the current speaker will preside, and the clerk, we will nominate who we will nominate. The Democrats will nominate their candidate, and the clerk will call the roll. And each of us have to stand at our desk and announce our vote. It's the only time in the legislature we actually stand and announce our vote.
Some old school voting.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that and watching this race closely. Again, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, my pleasure. Good seeing you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Next, I'm joined by Jane Adams, Director of Cover Alabama. Jane, thanks for coming on the show.
Glad to be here, Todd.
Can you tell us more about Cover Alabama and what your mission is in the state?
Sure. Cover Alabama is a nonpartisan coalition of 118 organizations, statewide organizations, committed to finding solutions that will provide access to quality, affordable health insurance for all Alabamians. We want to make sure that every Alabamian has the ability to go to the doctor when they need to and has the insurance they need that will make sure that they get that coverage.
This week there was this event with the Community Foundation of Birmingham, had a lot of different players there. Parka was involved, I know. It was called Woven Together, and one central focus was discussion about the expansion of Medicaid, the economic impacts, revenue, all that kind of stuff. How did that conversation go?
I think it went okay. I was pleased to see a lot of people attended. The Kiwanis Club of Birmingham also sponsored it, so we had a couple of hundred people there, which was good. There were robust discussions from both UAB Health Systems and UAB, economists about the financial impact of Medicaid expansion, the increase in labor force participation. There was conversations that happened amongst a couple of lawmakers, which I think were good, but just perhaps missing the full picture of what it truly means to be a person who is in the coverage gap, which was always on top of my mind as I was sitting there. What does it really mean to not have health insurance but be low income and working in Alabama?
Well, I was going to ask you about that to kind of paint a picture, but first let's just set the table here. I know there are a lot of children on Medicaid. That's been intentional through the All Kids program to get kids covered with health insurance. But for able-bodied adults, what are the income thresholds for qualifying for Medicaid in Alabama?
Well, I think this is going to shock you, and I just have to say that these are annual numbers, not monthly income, but annual income, household income. So if you are a parent and you make, two parents and a child, and you make less than $4,000 a year, you would qualify for Medicaid. If you are an individual and you make $0, you don't have any children, you can never qualify for Medicaid. There's no qualification for anyone who doesn't have a child, no matter how low their income is. And then if you do have children, you have to be very, very, very poor, like 18% of the federal poverty level. It's one of the most stringent Medicaid programs in the United States. The only other state that has a more stringent eligibility threshold is Texas. So there's really
$4,000 a year.
A year, yeah, and that's if you're a parent. If you have no children, there's nothing.
And I mean, not to be crass, but there's some summer jobs that pay more than that,
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you are, a parent and you have a child, and you make anywhere between $4,000 and about $26,000 a year, you are in the coverage gap, which means that no matter if you want to or not, there is no way that you could get access to affordable health insurance because you can't qualify for Medicaid. You make too much money for Medicaid, but you don't make enough to qualify for a subsidy on the healthcare marketplace. And that's who the coverage gap is. It's people who are working, making income, annual income, but perhaps working in the gig economy, working in shift labor, or working a low-income job.
And, I want you to kind of help paint a picture of what that's like to not have insurance. I know there was a time in my life that I did not have insurance, and a trip to the hospital, it took me 2 years to pay that debt off. But I'm more fortunate than many. And so talk to me about life in that coverage gap when you aren't able to have insurance for the truly low income.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that those who are in the coverage gap are working, right? And so, for instance, in Lee County and the city of Auburn, 3 in 4 of the individuals who are in that coverage gap are working, right, in Lee County. So these aren't people who are just sitting at home, they're contributing to the economy. Did you go to the gas station this morning to fill up your tank or stop by a fast food restaurant?
Not today, but yeah, all the time. All the time.
So every time you go to the gas station, that attendant who is working there is most likely in the coverage gap. They're working shift work, right, and not working 40 hours a week, sometimes working 30 hours a week at minimum wage or even $15 an hour, right? But that still puts them solely in the income threshold where they're making too much money for Medicaid but not enough to get a subsidy. Same thing when you go to your favorite fast food restaurant. I like Taco Bell. I plan to stop there on my way home to Huntsville. That person who is serving me at Taco Bell at the drive-thru is most likely in the coverage gap. They are working a low minimum wage job. They make too much money for Medicaid, but not enough money to be able to get a premium subsidy. So that person who is preparing my food does not have health insurance, which means when they are sick, they are going to work sick and not able to get the care they need. And it gets even worse than just like the impact of whether or not I eat food by someone who, made it sick. I think about cancer, right? There are a lot of individuals who are working in construction or working at a hair salon that might have a lump, right? And that lump progresses and progresses and progresses because they are afraid of those medical bills. They don't have health insurance and they're afraid of going to the doctor. That means that when they do finally get Medicaid coverage, it's Medicaid coverage because they're at late stage cancer diagnosis, essentially going to die. So Medicaid expansion, it's real people. Like every single day you meet people who are in the coverage gap. If you're going to the gas station, if you're going to a fast food restaurant, if your kids are in childcare, if your grandparents are in a nursing home, those are the type of workers that we're talking about. For men, it's mostly construction workers. For women, it's typically people in the service industry or hospitality industry. Again, these folks are working, and you wouldn't say they're lazy in any sort of the way, but they're just not making enough to be able to get quality, affordable health insurance. And if they lived in Kentucky, they would be getting Medicaid expansion.
Well, when it comes to the subject of Medicaid expansion in this building, in fact, we just had this conversation in the hallway.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people, lawmakers mostly, saying, look, it'd be nice. It'd be nice to be able to expand Medicaid, but the state simply cannot afford it revenue-wise over the long term. How do you respond to that argument?
Well, if I got in a time machine and I time traveled back to 2014, I would say, yes, I agree with you. But it's not 2014 anymore, it's 2022. And things have changed about the financial outcomes of Medicaid expansion. One major thing that has changed is that the federal government is now providing more money than we've seen since 2010 to cover the cost of Medicaid expansion. They very much so want states to expand Medicaid and are dangling even more financial incentives for states to do it. But another thing that has changed, from 2014 to currently, is that our health system still had struggles. We didn't expand Medicaid in 2010, we didn't expand it in 2014, but that didn't change the reality that we had substance use disorder problems spreading with opioid addictions all across our state. That didn't change the reality that we had mental health crisis, right, where adults were facing mental health crises. That didn't change the fact that we have, prisoners who are going to the hospital to get inpatient care at the hospital. And so, the state saw those problems, lawmakers saw those problems and said, well, how are we going to pay for it? And they just decided to pay entirely for it. So all of the prisoners and, ADOC that go to the hospital, it's our state taxpayers that are paying $100, 100% of that cost. The federal government isn't contributing any. So if we expand Medicaid for all of those same services that we're providing, substance use, mental health, prisoner health care, and spent, our tax dollars, the general fund is paying for that, not the federal government. If we expand Medicaid, the federal government will cover 90% of that. So in a case like that hospital care for that prisoner, where we're paying 100% now, if we expand Medicaid next year, the federal government will cover 90% of that cost, and we'll only have to pay 10%. So that's why you see in PARCA's economic analysis that Medicaid expansion, and I know lawmakers don't like it when I say this, but it really truly does pay for itself. And it pays for itself because lawmakers did the right thing years ago when they decided to actually invest money to try to solve these problems. But what eventually happened is they were just putting Band-Aids over the issue. And the real way that we solve our, healthcare issue in our state is by making a significant investment at really solving the problem and not just putting a Band-Aid over it with state dollars. So if you expand Medicaid, you have about, on average, an annual savings in the general fund of about $397 million. And that's money that you're not saving, but you're able to reinvest or put away to save for Medicaid expansion in the out years. So it really does pay for itself, and I would love to talk to any lawmaker, get out a whiteboard and show them how it works.
Something tells me you're going to be doing that. We're out of time for this time, but I hope you'll come back and continue this conversation. It's one of these issues that we do expect to come up in the next year or so.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks again. We'll be right back.
The Alabama Department of Archives and History was founded in 1901. Becoming the nation's first publicly funded independent state archives agency. The archives identifies, preserves, and makes accessible records and artifacts of enduring historical value to the state. Thomas Owen founded the agency and served as its first director. He was succeeded by his wife, Marie Bankhead Owen, who headed the archives for 35 years and was the second woman to lead a state agency.
NASA is set to launch the Artemis rocket this Saturday. It had been slated for Monday, but was scheduled due to some problems. Joining me now to discuss it is Brandon Burrows, systems engineer for the Boeing Company. Brandon, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we are all excited about Artemis and the launch that's on track for Saturday. Tell me more about your role with Boeing and with the Space Launch System.
Yes, so since I was an intern back in 2016, I joined the Boeing Company as an engineer on the Space Launch System program, originally in Huntsville, Alabama, as a stress analyst. And after graduating from college, Tuskegee University, in engineering, I traveled down to Kennedy Space Center and started my full-time job there. And I've been there for about the past 5 years as a systems engineer. And primarily what I did as a systems engineer was ensure that the rocket was properly integrated before launch here in Kennedy Space Center. So there's a lot of different parts and pieces to the SLS rocket, and my job was just to make sure that all those components fit properly together and that they all communicate effectively to each other. So that's been my roles thus far with Boeing.
Wow, so you're there at Kennedy, where the launch is going to take place, really in the thick of things.
Yeah, no, it's been great. A lot of activity going on right now, and super exciting times. Looking forward to launch. So
now with the Artemis program, the goal is ultimately to get humans back to the moon. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. We want to get back to the moon, but this time we want to stay. We also want to make sure we do some very important accomplishments, such as landing the first woman and person of color on the surface of the moon. So that's another big milestone that we look forward to accomplishing with the Artemis program.
I've got to say that the SLS almost reminds me of almost like a combination between Apollo and the shuttle, because you've got the booster rockets like the shuttle, and then you've got the core, the core and the capsule that seems to operate a lot like Apollo did. You're responsible for the core stage, though, the big one right there in the middle. How much do you have to coordinate with other companies that are responsible for the other components, like the boosters?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. There's constant coordination, even down up into launch. There's always coordination between those those different entities, those different companies, because at the end of the day, all of those pieces have to fit together in a seamless fashion. So the only way you do that is to have constant communication. Things change. Engineering can be updated. All kinds of things can change, but it's up to each company to make sure that, and NASA as well, to coordinate those different changes and those different correlations to make sure that the vehicle's properly, again, assembled and speaking to across those different subsystems effectively.
Now, there was a launch scheduled for Monday. That got scrapped. There were some problems, including a fuel leak, I think I read. How have those problems been addressed? Whatever problems led to that, cancellation, how have they been addressed to make sure this one on Saturday goes off without a hitch?
Yeah, so me personally, I haven't been in those rooms addressing those problems. Again, like I mentioned, I made sure that the vehicle was in the proper configuration before launch. But NASA has been working hard to reach out to all the different, companies and entities that are related to those different challenges that we have right now, and making sure that we do have a plan for it on how we can overcome those things. The exact thing that they will be doing, that's kind of up to NASA to kind of run the show. And I don't think even at this point, every little thing, every T has been crossed and every I has been dotted. So it's one of those things where it's a constant evaluation that is still going on, and I can't speak exactly to those direct changes that have been made.
Sure, understood. But this moment has been years in the making for you and a lot of people at Boeing and across the Space Launch System community. How exciting is it right now within your company and there in Cape Kennedy to finally, hopefully, be seeing the Space Launch System fly?
To be honest, man, it's one of those things like it's a dream come true for me, and I think I can speak for a lot of people that they feel the same way. At the end of the day, I think one of the biggest things that I like for you to take away when I speak about how excited I am about this opportunity is this is bigger than just Boeing. This is, as a country, we're getting ready to send people back to the moon, and it's time for good. So that's super exciting just for the country as a whole. And again, there are so many different components that have to come together here at Kennedy Space Center that come from many different states around the country. There are a lot of suppliers, a lot of different companies that all contribute to this one goal that America can be continue as a leader in space. So all those things make me very, very excited and very, very proud to have had a piece in this upcoming accomplishment.
And there is a lot of excitement around Artemis. And I mean, I'm kind of a space nerd, but it seems like more and more people are paying attention. Do you think so much focus on this mission, the excitement around it, can kind of help the space program in general with popularity and support from the American people in Congress?
I definitely 100% do. I know I wasn't directly around during the time where they're developing the space shuttle, but from the mentors and people I've worked with in the past, they've told me that it took some time for them to have their first space shuttle launch, and that once they were able to successfully have a launch and stuff, that there was excitement that built up around that program. So I can only kind of lean back on those people who've come before me to remind me that, hey, there are challenges on your way. There, it takes time, but the public will come around and will be behind you once you get some successful flights behind you and things like that. So that's really exciting to see that come to fruition now. So,
well, Brandon, if I may, I wanted to ask, you're a native Alabamian, right? And you mentioned being a Tuskegee grad. I think a lot of our viewers will find that really cool. Tell us more about your background and how you got into the space career in space.
Yeah, no. So I was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, and I lived there all the way up until I graduated high school. When I was really young, I always kind of had the normal, I don't want to say cliche, dream of going into space by looking up at the stars. That's kind of where it all started, right? And it led to me wanting to pursue a career in engineering, which and in that case, I needed to make sure I was studying my math and science and things like that. Decided to attend Tuskegee University, where I did get my bachelor's in mechanical engineering with a concentration in aerospace engineering. And I was able to have some doors unlocked for me by Tuskegee. They gave me a full academic scholarship which was something that I wasn't able to get at a lot of other institutions. But Tuskegee said, we'll give this guy a chance. So I thank them a lot for that. But they also put me in a position to be recruited by various different aerospace companies. And I made my decision with Boeing to stick with them. And I'm very happy with that decision. And the rest is history. Now I'm here. So,
well, for any young people watching that may want to follow in your footsteps and do the engineering and even something in space, what would your advice be to those folks?
My advice, I think at the end of the day, you have to have a lot of drive, a lot of commitment to whatever your dream is. And if that is your dream, it's going to be yourself that really sits down and say, hey, I want to do this, and you're going to have to really push yourself. So if you run into a door that seems to be closed, either try another door or try to push on that door harder, because you'll be surprised on how much strength you have to push through that door and make it to where you want to be. And I definitely feel like for myself, I never let anyone stop me from making my dream come true. I'm glad to finally be here.
Well, Brandon, good luck tomorrow on the launch. And we're rooting for you, and we really appreciate the time you take during a very busy time to come share on Capital Journal.
No problem. Again, thank you for having me.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll be right back here next week, next Friday night at 7:30 here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capital Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.